Okay, we are going to learn Yirtz Hashem, should be Matzliach, and a new limud of Hilchos Teshuvah la Rambam. And let me say the following: that usually, when I teach Hilchos Teshuvah, I pick out selected Rambams that are important and inspiring. But that's not what we're doing now. We're going to start from Aleph and just see how far we can get. Some of it being technical or even kodshim. But nevertheless, it's I want to learn it properly. I just want to say, if anybody has, if you have a piece of paper with you, I made a list of the components of tshuva. Like tshuva, we all know what tshuva is. You do tshuva, but there's actually a number of different things that the Rambam speaks about here, and we have to figure out. This is going to be our task in the next few weeks to figure out what each one of these things do. I have on Shabbos afternoon giving a shiur, also the afternoon shiur between mincha, after mincha, in Teshuvah, but that's on Hilchos Teshuvah. There, I want to speak about hasagas of Teshuvah, so I'm not going to do that now. How it works in Chazal, how it works in the different stories in the Gemara. But right now, I want to learn Hilchos Teshuvah. So I'm going to just read you a list if you can memorize it or keep it in mind or write it down or whatever. So first of all, there's tshuva itself that the Rambam describes in Perek Beis of having charata and a chet. Again, we're talking about, let's talk about specifically not a bal tshuva in the norm and the way it's used in the vernacular. That's a different story. But let's talk about somebody who did a chet, like you lost your head for a minute and you were hungry, so you ate in a treif restaurant or something like that. So I ate treif, or one of those new hashgachas, So you ate treif, and now, my gosh, what did I do? I want to do tshuva. So that's what we're talking about over here. So the first thing is I'm not going first, second, third, but I'm just explaining. There's the inyan of tshuva itself, which is to have charata for what you did and be makabel on yourself not to do that anymore. But there's a lot of other inyanim that are melaveh it. So for instance, first of all, there's the inyan of carbon. There's the inyan of yisurim that the Rambam mentions. Carbon obviously is bizman shebeis hamikdash hayakayim, but there's an inyan to bring a carbon. You have to bring a carbon. So is that part of tshuva? Not part of tshuva. It's another component. Yisurim, that a person's suffering. Suffering can come in a few different ways. Either way, it hurts. Suffering can come just from life, suffering, or suffering, inflicted suffering, like makas. That's also suffering. So what does that do? There's the inyan of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippurim is machlokes in the Gemara, whether if your tshuva is more miskabel on Yom Kippur or Kedas Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Itzumah Shel Yom Mechaper. Yom Kippur itself has a kaparet, so that means without tshuva or with tshuva, and it's not clear, by the way, in the Rishonim how we paskin. Do we paskin Itzumah Shel Yom Mechaper or not? There's the inyan on Yom Kippur of a Seir HaMishtaleach. So that's the Kohen Gadol takes, as everybody knows, 2 goats and does the whole process of a Seir HaMishtaleach. So if you're doing tshuva, what do you need a Seir HaMishtaleach? Nowadays, we don't have a Seir HaMishtaleach. What are we missing exactly? But it's a component. There's a very important component of vidui. Hashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu. And we know that if you do tshuva, you have to do vidui, which we're going to talk about in a minute. If you bring a carbon, you have to do vidui. And even by the Seir HaMishtaleach, which happens on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol says vidui, says Meforish in the Chumash, he says vidui for the whole Klal Yisrael. Oh, Hashamnu Bagadnu, right? We say that on Yom Kippur. So tshuva needs vidui, carbon needs vidui, Arba Mitzvahs Basin need vidui. So what does that do? There is, again, Bizman Shas and Hadar Noyakayim, Arba Mitzvahs Basin. There's, which the Rambam mentions. There's Misa in general, Yom HaMisa Mechaper, which is part of Hilchos Teshuvah. So we have eight inyanim that one has to do when they do a chet. It's not just like you do tshuva, or it's not just like you go to Yom Kippur, or it's not just like you klap vidui. There's 8 different things. Anybody want to say them back over to me? Come on, guys.
Carbon.
Okay. 1.
Yisurim, right?
2.
Yom Kippur.
3.
Esai HaMishtaleach.
4.
Vidui.
Misa.
Vidui.
Vidui. Misa, somebody said. That's 6.
Yeah. And Abba Mrs. Bezdin.
7.
And just Misa by itself.
Right. So we're still in 7. And Shuvah. So very good. Philip, are you a genius or did you write that down?
I wrote it down.
Okay. Doesn't mean you're not a genius. I'm just saying that. Okay. So this is important because right now, you just pointed out something that people, I got like when you say a person became Baal Tshuva, a person says I'm Baal Tshuva. Chabad, Breslov, Eshet Torah, Baal Tshuva. So I always think to myself like, and there's an answer to this question, like, what does it mean you're about tshuva? In other words, you were Machal Shabbos 7,000 times. So did you do tshuva on that Chil Shabbos 7,000 times? When Beis Mikdash comes, are you going to have to bring like thousands of korbanos or even one korban somehow for all of them? Like, what's the deal? Or did you were just inspired one day to make a lifestyle change and you said, I'm a Baal Tshuva? So my question is, does a Baal Tshuva have to do tshuva? Does a Baal Tshuva have to do tshuva? Or I go through some Yom Kippur, and then, and if Misa, for instance, is Mechaper, Yom HaMisa is Mechaper, for instance, so that means that, there's no Gehenna, because everybody dies.
And I wanted to ask about Yisurin as well, because Yisurin, do you have to be makabel the Yisurin as a kapara for your chet, or is it,
These are all the extremely important questions. I'll tell you, I'll give you just like a little advance notice that and I actually said this to people, like non-from people, that if a person, God forbid, has huge amount of suffering, and it's memarikas achet and it's mechaper achet, but if you don't have kavana, I'm telling you tachlis, if you don't have kavana for tshuva, sagar nishver doesn't do anything. It's not memarik, it's not mechaper. So if you're going to the dentist and you're sitting in the dentist chair, he's drilling on you, kedai to have a moment of kavana. But let this suffering, I don't want to suffer, give me more Novocaine, but whatever it is that I'm suffering here, let it be mechaper avarnas, because without that kavana, nothing happened. So the same thing is, it's chaval. A person should have so much yisurim, God forbid, and not be mechaven for that the yisurim are mechaper. However, what I didn't explain in the last 60 seconds is what is the kavana. The kavana is that it should be a kapara. The kavana is that I have to do tshuva with it. If you're a good rabbi, you go around the hospitals and you say vidui with people. Sometimes they're not even conscious. You say vidui with people. What does that? What does it do exactly? In other words, is that mechaper? That like what's the nakuda here? Does it work without tshuva? So are these, again? My main question is: are these independent concepts? Korban, Yisurim, Yom Kippur, Sarah Mishtaleach, V'chuli, Yom HaMisa. Are these independent concepts, or do you have to do all of them because you did a chet? And we violated our purpose for creation. And now that I did a chet, I've got 8 things that I need to do. Okay, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, so there's 4 things that I need to do. And if you only do those 4, does that mean like I didn't do anything, or I still walking around with the chet because we don't have the Beis HaMikdash? That gives us a new if that would be true, that gives us a whole new hope for the Beis Hamikdash. So these are all the question, and many more questions. But what I wanted to point out is that these 8 inyanim. I also, before we start the Rambam, I want to tell you a little a vart that I just realized a couple of days ago. The Gemara says famously, and I think this is a psicha to the whole inyan. The Gemara says, to Yoni, to your point, the Gemara says in brachas, haroya sheyisurim boyin alav. Person sees, I'm having yisurim, I'm suffering. Like why? Why is God doing this? So the Gemara says, what? Yifash shveish b'maisu. So the Gemara says, okay, Yifash shveish b'maisu. Pish beish v'loi matzah. Yitla b'bittel Torah. Pish beish v'loi matzah, meaning you're not over bittel Torah. I don't know who's going to say that. Yisurin shel avah. So you know it's Yisurin shel avah. So here you have a person. The Gemara is giving you a hadracha. You have a person. Aroya she Yisurin b'idalav. Who doesn't have Yisurim? Everybody has Yisurim. But Aroya she Yisurin b'idalav. What's the process? The first process is Yifash Shabaisa. Now here's the vart, which I think you'll agree is Pashup Shah. That Hava Amina, that if a person has Yisurim and they want to get rid of those Yisurim, so what should you do? Yifash Shabaisa and do tshuva. So I'm here to give the disappointing message as such, that no, haraya yisurim shebayin alav, haraya adam sheyisurim bayin alav. Don't let it go to waste, and have yisurim that are not mechaper the avain. Right away, be mefashra shemaisav. Because by being mefashra shemaisav, it's not that you're going to get rid of the yisurim necessarily. It's that you've given the Yisurim mashmois of miru kachet. And now at least you're getting your money's worth for your Yisurim, which is a totally new way of looking at the Gemara. And of course, this explains how could it be that somebody is mefashish, ma'asav, they do tshuva, and they still have Yisurim. The answer is one thing has nothing to do with the other. All the Gemara is saying is yifashish ma'asav, yifashish ma'asav, and by somehow finding something that I need to do tshuva for, even if, by the way, even if I don't do tshuva, it doesn't say yasa tshuva. But at least just yifashish ma'asav, which I'd like to also explain in the coming shiur, yifashish ma'asav unto itself is going to give a hineni muchan a mezuman to the yisurim that I'm having. It puts the yisurim into a ruchniistic miskeret. And once I do that, so now my Yisurim have value in terms of kaparas hachatoim. Does anybody disagree with me here? I'm shot in the Gemara.
I think also from, as the Rav is saying this, the lashon of the Gemara is Yisurim shaboyin alav. Does it mean that he had? Right, so if they're even it may be like they're beginning to happen. It's just, it's like, it's in the middle of the process, or it's the start of the process. That's when to think about it, not like they happen, whatever. Right? Like as Zorav says, to chap the opportunity now.
I always think, what is it that the Israelis do before they blow up buildings? A soft tap. but
which, on the roof.
Yeah,
On the roof they call it.
yeah.
How do we know that you have to be makabel yisurim in order for them to be mechaper?
I'm going to prove it to you in a minute.
Okay.
He uses expressions Zalzana Kapara.
Oh, that should be Shagar Befina. Everybody says it, by the way. It's interesting. Like, the Polish Yidden say Zalzana Kapara, and the Sfardim say Kapara. Like, everybody understands what that is. Like I think that, by the way, some of these things that we say don't have a lot of mashmais. Like, for instance, if you're talking in shul to somebody about business on Shabbos and you say Nishtev Shabbos Geret, I don't know if that accomplishes anything. Like, it's like talking Lashon Hara and say Nish Lashon. I don't mean to speak Lashon Hara, but you are speaking Lashon Hara. It's you might not mean to, but you are speaking Lashon Hara. Or even Bli Ayin Hara. if it's a gilui das of some sort that I'm talking now me'ava, not mitoich ayin hara, but just saying bli ayin hara has no magical thing. But the exception to the rule, I think, is zozayna kapara, because even if you have a little bit of kavanah in what you're saying, zozayna kapara is giving a koteret. It's giving like a headline to the Yisurim that I'm having. Everybody suffers on one level or another. Everybody's has some pain, from the dentist to major suffering. No, we should all not suffer at all. But just this idea of, and I don't even know if it has to be bedibur, yifashresh b'maisav, but the yifashresh b'maisav is not to get rid of the Yisurim necessarily. It's to give it a perspective. So that's the part I want to say. Let's look at the Rambam. And I think with this little hakdama, everything will be a little clearer. The Rambam says as follows: Parak Rishon Halacha Aleph. Kol mitzvah shebetorah, bein essay, bein lois essay, bein over adam alachas mehem, whether bein bezadain, bein bishkaga, whether you did the avera on purpose or you did the avera by accident. Kishiyasa tshuva, when you do tshuva, v'yashuv mechetay, and you return from your chet, chayav lihit vadot. You have to say vidui, you have to say chatasi lefanecha Hashem. You have to say the chet. Lifnei akel baruch hu, meaning you have to stand in front of Hashem and say, al chet shechatasi lefanecha b'lashon hara. Shinamar, how do I know this, says the Rambam? Isha kiyasu chet, whatever chet it might be, v'hisvadu es chatasam, and they say vidui on their chet. Asher asu. It's pasuk in Bamidbar. Zeh vidui dvarim. That's called, the Torah there is referring to vidui zeh mitzvahs essay. And that vidui is a mitzvahs essay. Okay. A mouthful in the Rambam in 3 sentences. What are the chidushim of the Rambam here? Number 1, kol mitzvah shebetorah kishiyasa tshuva. Let's go earlier even. Bein bezadain, bein bishkaga. Whether you did the avera b'mezid on purpose or you did it bishkaga by accident. What's missing there? What is there another way to do an avera?
Ba'inus?
Ba'inus, very good. So let's say you did avera ba'inus. Tachvay lebeis habliya. Somebody forces me to do an avera. So still an avera. Do you have to bring a carbon for such an avera? Who knows?
Onus Rahmana Patra.
Say it again and hear you.
Is it Onus Rahmana Patra or something like that?
Patre from what?
From the
Mitzvah sese.
I'm getting confused. Okay.
So mitzvah sese, that's a Rahman Patre. But I'm saying a person does an avera ba'ones, like, or below das at all. Like
It's less than shogeg. It's less than shogeg. It should be chayv anything. Shogeg, you bring a chatos, and onus, you should bring nothing.
So you go into a kosher restaurant and you find out they're serving you really pork. So you ate a meal of chazer. So that's called ba'onas. I didn't know. There's a hashkacha, there's a letter, everything. Like I didn't know. I'm eating the tray. So which happens. That happens to people. It's happened in my lifetime. I've seen it. So is there a carbon or not a carbon for that? Anybody know? Rabbi Yaacov, what do you say? Is a carbon or not a carbon? I can't hear you.
I say there's a carbon.
There is a carbon. What carbon? Carbon chatas is for a shoygeg. Carbon asham is for certain mazes.
Yeah, I think there's not. You probably have to do tshuva though, so it's surprising it's not written here.
So
you should be more
interesting here. By the way, it's machlekes in the Gemara, but interesting here. The Rambam says bein bezadin, bein bishkaga. He doesn't include einus. So mashma halacha There's a halacha that if you did an avera ba'ones, meaning what's the pshat nones? Pshat nones is beli das. I had no idea. That's what an onus means. An onus doesn't mean necessarily you were forced to do the avera. But an onus means that I had no das at all for doing this avera. It's less than a shogeg, as you say, Avram. It's less than a shogeg. So, Masha from the Rambam, there's no chiyuv vidui. Okay, that's diuk one.
There's no teshuva because you haven't willingly done anything wrong.
Well, you haven't done anything wrong nafshi, but you did do something wrong. You killed somebody.
Then you wouldn't have done it. So how can you do teshuva on something which you wouldn't have done if you would have known?
Let's say you kill somebody by accident, not by accident, by onus.
You didn't want to do it.
So there's nothing to do. You're saying there's nothing to do tshuva for.
What can you correct?
Would you say the same thing by Dina Mominus? If you accidentally, messed up the, hit the guy's car, it was an accident. I didn't know that it was there because whatever. Accidents happen, but
Accident means shogeg, no?
That's shogeg, yeah. He wasn't. He was negligent in that case. That's an avera in its own right, but an onus is not necessarily.
So let's say David, how are you machalik between an onus and a shogeg? Let's just get our terms right. What's the difference?
it sounds like an onus is a case where there was coercion.
No.
A shogeg means that you had das, but I made a mistake. An onus means I had no das to do this at all. Whether I was coerced or otherwise, I had no das.
Someone stored the arsenic in the salt shaker instead of salt.
Yeah. Did that happen to you?
Something happened to someone else, obviously.
However, for the rabbi, there is still a common denominator, both in the case of shogeg and in the case of onus. While there is no intent to do the avera in both cases, an avera in both cases was committed, and there needs to be a kapara on the avera even if there's no intent.
Even by onus, you're saying. In other words, you kill somebody by accident, you have to have a kapara. That's what you're saying?
It would lichora, someone, the Gemara talks about it a lot, and the head of the axe kills someone. Shogeg, but he still is chayiv misa.
Going to
He
the
runs
Arei
off.
Miklat is itself.
The Arei Miklat.
No, shogeg, not onus.
But he's a shogeg, he's not an onus, he's a shogeg.
Right.
But there is an avera,
Why
even
we
though he
call
had no
it
intent.
onus and avera altogether?
What is that you took?
Why are we calling onus an avera?
Because you killed somebody.
Avera means I sinned. I didn't do anything.
So let me just define the question here, according to what you're saying. Does an avera mean that I'm violating God's will? In which case I'm onus, I had no das to violate, God forbid, I would violate your will. Or does an avera mean that something bad was done? Something bad was done. I spread a virus. I didn't even know I had the virus. I spread a virus. Somebody died. God forbid. So that's an onus. It's an onus. So by the way, isn't it true, Avram, that if that happens, l'chayra kohen is not allowed to duchen? Avram, you paying attention? It means that l'chayra kohen is not allowed to duchen, correct? Killed somebody bonus. Somebody was in a car accident and they killed somebody. I don't think a kohen is allowed to be ola l'duchen anymore.
I think they have a question in the army with the soldiers, the Israeli soldiers.
Yeah. Especially if you kill another Jew by accident, a friendly fire, as they call it.
But I just wanted, on that point as well, I wanted to say, killing somebody, there are times that say killing somebody could be a mitzvah if he's a roidif. Let's say, you're a marksman, a sniper in the army, and there's a terrorist with a suicide that was about to blow himself up. You kill him So there's an intention there to kill him, and it's a mitzvah even to do it.
Mitzvah, yeah.
So it's the das really that turns the act into an avera or not.
Yeah.
And it's like
I still want to say, and I want to put this out there for future reference, that there's two parts to every avera. There is the mice of the avera, you ate treif. Maybe even if you ate treif with complete onus, it could be hurts your neshama. Could be. Matamte masa lev. But then there's the mered of an avera. So we always have to remember that there's an avera, the maisa, like everything in life. There's a maisa, and then there's the kavana. The kavana has to do with the mered in the avera. In this case, what's the correct kavana to have when you do an avera? The answer is mered. And then there's the maisa avera. Oh my gosh, I didn't mean to do that. And then in between there seems to be a shogeg, because a shogeg is a mistake. And one can always say, and I think the reason why you clearly have to bring a carbon for a shogeg, carbon chatos, is because every mistake, or most mistakes, let's say, could have been avoided. Okay, somebody's ma'anas me, I couldn't have avoided it. But a shogeg means a mistake. So let's say somebody is careless and spreads a virus, which is, by the way, could be, I mean, thank Bezer Hashem, we shouldn't Hashem Yishmar, but that could be considered l'chayra, killing somebody b'shogeg, that you'd have to go to Ari Miklat. Am I being too harsh? And if you're not, but it's certainly not a mazid. It's not a ma'aser ritzicha, but it could be that there's a gram ritzicha b'shogeg. Choliot. We shouldn't be callous about that. If there's really a shaila pikuach nefesh out there, I'm not getting involved in the medical or the political part of it, but if there's actually a pikuach nefesh, so there's always the mered of the chait and the chait itself, and it makes a big nafkamina to know which one is which, so that we can understand the halachas better.
If the Rambam says we're not we don't do Teshuva on us, does that means that he's paskening like the Rishonim would say that we don't bring a korban?
Yes.
Is that Hoshet our shayla over here that it's not called an avera?
The Minchas Chinuch learns from this Rambam that the shitas of Rambam is that there's no shaychus of carbon to an oinus. That's the Minchas Chinuch, I think, medayik from this Rambam. The diuk was mine, but then I looked around to see if anybody else is medayik it, and there's a Minchas Chinuch not here, but by Karbanos, Ma'aser Karbanos.
Does that resolve the question as to whether it's mered is the kovea?
Oh, so if I'm learning right pshat in the Rambam, so it comes out that if there's no mered, there's no tshuva, which somebody said before. How are you going to, Philip? You said that, right? If there's no mered, what are you doing tshuva on? Okay. Even though a kohen won't be able to do it. So that must be a different thing. That how can I bring the Shechina into Klal Yisrael? So of course so. But you do see that it's not like I didn't do anything.
Yeah, I think with Berchas Kohanim, they bring down the Kohen who's done Averas, he still has the opportunity to do Berchas Kohanim. But if he killed someone, but let's say in a car crash or something, b'shogeg, or even ba'onos, he's got the status of someone who killed. So meaning that he's a murderer, even if whether he did it b'shogeg, b'mezid, ba'onos. So that gives you the chiluk, that it's not, the issue isn't that he did an Avera, the issue is that a murder was done by him.
Yeah, but we know that, but what's the lumdus? What's the reason for the difference?
Because someone who caused someone to die, a kohen who caused someone to die can't do Birchas Kohanim. Not because he's a Bal Avera, but because that he caused his death.
Okay, so we're saying there's a different din over there that has nothing to do with Averas.
Yeah.
Okay. Now comes the most important teaching.
Sorry, can you have mered without an avera as well? We had when a woman makes a vow and her husband annuls it, but she doesn't know and she transgresses that vow. That's a mered, but without an avera.
So let me, being that we're here, let me tell you that all this is a Meforsha Gemara, which just occurred to me this second, because the Gemara says, let me see if I can remember the exact lashon. The Gemara in Yuma. A person puts his hand out to eat basar, to eat basar. Va'ala biyadai chelav. Right, that's the case of the Gemara. And he eats it. And or the other way around, if he wants to eat kosher and he ends up eating treif. I remember the lashon of the Gemara. The Gemara has two scenarios there in Hilchos Karbanos. So
what would be the reverse? If a person had thought it was not kosher and he ate kosher, so then that's a problem also?
if a person wants to eat treif, you decide you're going to eat treif. I want to eat treif. I'm finished. I want to eat treif. So you get off the bus in a non-Jewish neighborhood and you go into the first restaurant you eat, fine, and you go and you eat. Little did you know that that restaurant happened to be supplied by the kosher distributor. So you didn't eat treif, like Absalachas, you wanted to eat treif, you didn't eat treif. So what's the halacha with that person? You have to bring a carbon, you don't have a carbon. So there you have mered without chet. Or the other way around, you went into a kosher restaurant. It's the two cases in the Gemara. And you thought you're eating kosher, but you're eating treif. So there you have chet without mered. So comes a Rabbeinu Yoina and Shari Teshuva. This just occurred to me this minute. I remember this. Comes a Rabbeinu Yoina and Shari Teshuva, and he says, "What's worse, the guy who did the avera without the mered, or the guy who did the mered without the avera?" We already established right here that there's two halakim to an avera. So the Rabbeinu Yoina says this, and I believe the Marsha says this also in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara says this is what the Gemara means when it says, Hirhure avera kashin me avera. Hirhure avera, you know, you're familiar with the Gemara? That hirhure avera kashin me avera, that if you had a hirhur of mered, which was bali de maisa, even though your maisa was not an avera, and you compare that to somebody who did a maisa avera, even though there was no hirhure avera, so you're dividing the thing. This is Marshan, Sanhedrin, Samasayin. So you have two halakim, and Marshan, the Rabbeinu Yoina also are asking which is worse. So what's the answer? So says the Gemara, Hirhure avera, kashime avera. I didn't do anything wrong. So the answer is because you did a mered. Yeah. Now, the next diuk in the Rambam is extremely important. Extremely important. Kishiyasa tshuva v'yashuv mechetoi chayav li yisvados. So, what the Rambam should say? You did an avera, do tshuva. What does he mean? Kishiyasa tshuva. So the chiyuv is lisvados, and he says that's the mitzvah because it says zed vidu dvarim lisvados chatasam vidu zed mitzvah saseh. What about tshuva? The main thing is tshuva, yeah. So is tshuva the mitzvah saseh, or is vidu the mitzvah saseh? The Rambam he said casually, like, okay, was there a page before this that I missed that kishiyasa tshuva? No, this is the beginning. When you do tshuva, a person does a chet, bein bezadain, bein b'shkaga, and you did tshuva. So now, says the Rambam, opens up Hilchos Teshuvah by saying that you have to say vidui. Comes the Kesef Mishnah and others, they say, well, this is the Rambam l'shitase because he doesn't list tshuva as a mitzvah saseh.
But the patiach of Hilchos Teshuvah sort of mitigates that a little bit, doesn't it?
What do you mean? You mean the title?
Yeah.
More than
No,
that.
not just the title, the definition that he gives under the title. Hilchos Teshuvah mitzvahs aseh.
Oh, yes. No, I didn't know what-
Teshuvah hachote mecheto.
Right. Assuming that was written by the Rambam.
Oh, there's a doubt about that?
Yeah. But in Brisk, they hold this is written by the Rambam and you have to be medayik in it. So you did good, Pinchas. Mitzvahs essay achas, if you have a Rambam and you look in the heading, mitzvah essay achas v'hu sheyashuv achote mecheto lifnei Hashem v'yisvada. You should do tshuva and do vidui. Ubir mitzvah zu v'ikarim hanigarim ima biglala pisrakim ela. So from the what they call in Brisk the tzion of the Rambam, or the headline subtitle. So here he says clearly that tshuva is a mitzvah, but he doesn't say that in the Rambam itself, or in the Sefer HaMitzvahs. Go look up the Rambam. The Ramban says it's a mitzvah. Rambam doesn't say it's a mitzvah. So the Achronim right away jump and they say that okay, Rambam l'shitase tshuva is not a mitzvah. Could be tefillah is also not a mitzvah, just something you're supposed to do. You know, reading Kriya Shema is a mitzvah. Tefillah is, you can't have Judaism without davening. It's one of the cardinal things that we do as Jews. You go to shul, right? You daven. But nevertheless, it might not be a mitzvah. So the Achronim learned that could be the Rambam saying that there's no mitzvah here per se, but kishiyasa tshuva, when you do tshuva, v'yashuv micheto, and you got rid of your chet, chayiv lisvades. So this is a fantastic thing. So what we see from here, not only the technical thing is tshuva mitzvahs essay or not a mitzvahs essay, which we have a stira between the Tzion and the Rambam itself. But I have the following question. Tell me how the Rambam answers it. Tshuva vidui. Are these two parts of doing tshuva, or are they two separate independent concepts?
The way I would from that Tziyun, I would say that the framework is tshuva, and the halacha defines a condition for that tshuva, which is that there has to be vidui there. They're not two separate things. A vidui out of the context of tshuva means nothing. What are you doing? You're mouthing words. You have to. The Torah requires tshuva, and the framework in which you do that tshuva is by saying vidui. If you don't have a vidui there, you're not doing tshuva.
Even if you're right that vidui without tshuva is just silly, which I disagree with, by the way. I'll explain to you why in a minute. But that doesn't mean that they're both one thing. It could be that there's only a possibility to do the mitzvah of vidui after you did tshuva. Just like many halachas, you can't do, you can't bring a carbon unless you prepared a carbon. You can't do a shechita unless you prepare the animal for shechita. So that doesn't mean that it's all one thing. It means you have a hachana for a mitzvah and a mitzvah. Or, let's say a person does tshuva without vidui. You did nothing?
The Rambam is meduyak, that they're two separate things.
Okay, tell me the words.
Kishiyasa tshuva v'yashuv mechetoi chayiv l'hisvados.
First you do tshuva, and then you do vidui. Two things. Not only two things, but one's a mitzvah, one's not. Right? That's how we're learning here. The only problem with that is that if it's two different things, and let me explain this, and then we'll say good Shabbos. Again, shaila on the floor. Tshuva vidui. Remember, I gave you a list of 8 things, but which we would decide on every single one of them. Are they independent or are they totally interdependent? Meaning, can you bring a carbon without doing tshuva? Does that make any sense? So the question on the floor is tshuva, meaning harata al avar, kabbalah al asid, all that, Yazov Azivas Hachet, independent of vidui, or is vidui part of that process? So two things or one thing. Nafkamina, of course, is can you do one without the other? Because if they're one big thing, shuva vidui, so if you did shuva without vidui, you didn't do anything. Just like Pinchas says, if you do vidui without shuva, you didn't do anything. So I'll say the same thing. If you do tshuva without vidui, you didn't do anything.
I agree.
But which is, of course, hard to digest. You know, like a person does tshuva and they don't happen to say vidui b'sof yamav, and they go through a whole. We find all the gemaras. We don't find vidui. We find Elazar ben Durdaya. We find all the different cases where the famous gemara in Kedushin, where a person is makadosh and ishal menasha nitzad gamor. We don't see that he says vidui there in the middle. The tshuva. So it's easier for me to imagine that you can do tshuva without vidui than you can do vidui without tshuva. But you want to say that it's two different things. So comes Yitzchak and he says, well, the Rambam seems to say mefurish that it's two different things, which would mean, if I'm correct, if I'm learning this correct, I'll be lumdus, which would mean that one is not dependent on the other b'chlal. You can have tshuva without vidui, you can have vidui without tshuva. So let me end with this, Rabbi Yitzchak, you'll enjoy this hesber. Let's start with the hard part. How could you have vidui without tshuva? What the heck is it? I'm sitting there, what does it mean? But let me say two things about this. I don't know if I agree, even though we say one of the al-chetz is al-chet shechatana lefanecha b'vidui peh, which means that I'm just saying it and I don't mean anything that I'm saying. I'm not sure if vidui without tshuva is called vidui peh. And this is different than anything that you've ever heard. Meaning, just because I didn't do tshuva, it doesn't mean that it's vidui peh. Vidui peh means, like that's what vidui peh means. I'm like, I have no, who says vidui peh means that you're saying vidui without tshuva? As an example, I was just talking to a Lubavitcher guy about this in Netanya. To Netanya last week. So he's there putting tefillin on people. Okay, ashrecha. Putting tefillin on people, beautiful. So he says to me, he says, this guy, I just went to Dam Mincha. I was looking for a place in the center there to Dam Mincha. So I'm watching this. So he says to me, Lubavitcher sees that looks at me like I'm not a Lubavitcher. He says to me, der Gemara sagt, he says to me, that a person comes to Shamayim and he's a karkafta de loimonach tefillin. He's a head that never put on tefillin. So terrible things about that person. Never put on tefillin. So now this guy, he tells me, is a karkafta de monach tefillin. That's what he tells me. Okay, agreed. So I said, to being who I am, I said to this guy, I said, why don't you say better? You also said Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad with him. So forget about being a karkafta de monach tefillin, which is a Zoharic idea. He just said Shema. So he says to me, yeah, I didn't have any kavanah. He just said Shema Yisrael. Well, first of all, I'm not criticizing him. He's doing the mitzvah. I'm just I'm the commentary. But first of all, who says he didn't have kavanah? And also, who says that when you and I are korei kriyash mashachars v'arvas and we didn't have kavanah, we're babbling away. Who's what? We weren't kind of mitzvah kriyashma. Miyamar. I'm sure it has more value with kavanah, but who's not? You didn't. How many days of our lives that we were busy or we didn't have kavanah, so we didn't do anything. Hard to say. So Yitzchak, this is the part that I think you'll enjoy. In the world of modern psychology, there's a concept of mindfulness. So everyone's familiar. So what does mindfulness mean? I don't think it just means, excuse my lay interpretation. I don't just think it means like, do you feel your chair? I don't think what it means. But the idea is, which I subscribe to, the idea in my mind is that let's say a person goes into a room full of people, you go to a chasana and you're like forever shy, you're extremely uncomfortable because you don't want to speak to anybody and you're embarrassed to speak to anybody, and you're not going to go over to somebody and say, hey, my name is Joe, what's your name? You're not the type, so you're very uncomfortable and you can't wait to get out of that place. If you're blessed to be a gregarious, social person, but let's say you're uncomfortable. So to me, mindfulness would say is think it through in your mind and say, you know why I'm uncomfortable right now? Because I'm very shy, and because I had this disappointment, somebody rejected me years ago, whatever you're going to say, but just bring it from being some kind of an amorphous thing in your psychology to bring it forward to an actual thought, mindfulness. And somehow or another, when you do that, Hashem helps the healing process begin. Just because you're mindful. I would like to suggest, that's just a mashal. I would like to suggest that if a person says, Al chet shechatasi lefanecha b'lashon hara, and you didn't do tshuva for the lashon hara, what does it mean? Am I going to say I actually never going to speak lashon hara again? Am I going to say that I really have charata for every conversation I ever had? Hard to say. I mean, it's good to do tshuva, important to do tshuva, but I see the vidui as an independent concept. The very fact that I'm able to not be in denial and acknowledge that I spoke lashon hara, I can't do. I'll tell you something. Let's say somebody decides they want to keep Shabbos, but they're not ready to quit their job. They're not ready to lose their parnasa or to make that kind of lifestyle change. So it's what does that mean? It doesn't mean that he's not makabel. He's verbalizing, I want to keep Shabbos. In a certain sense, he's a shomer Shabbos. And you'll get there with the tshuva. You'll get there. So what I'm saying is that it is possible in my mind, and this is a big chiddush, but it's possible in my mind that vidui dvar means vidui peh is toivel v'sharetz biyadai, like the Rambam says later. That's not plopping. That's nothing. But vidui without tshuva is not vidui peh. Vidui without tshuva is acknowledging, is coming to terms with, is first seeing that I have this chet, and it's a chet. Al chet shechatasi lefanecha b'lashon hara. Like every single one of us is when we clap that al chet. You don't have to think about the ochrei das. Every one of us, when we clap al chet shechatasi, I don't know if there's tshuva gemara on that. But nevertheless, it could be that vidui is an independent concept. So let's sum that up, and then I'll let you go. Comes out that the shaila here is, and I believe it's a machlekes rishonim. I actually believe it's a machlekes Rambam and Teshuva, which we'll get to at some point. But the shaila here is tshuva and vidui two independent concepts, or like the Koteres on the Rambam says, mitzvah esei achas. It's all part of one thing. Or, like the Rambam himself says, no. Kishiyasa tshuva, when you do tshuva, chayev li'isvados. Like it's two things. As Yitzchak said, it seems mefurish in the Rambam that it's two things, and other Rishonim also. So here we have a number of chakiras, which are going to help us understand this, Mirz Hashem, and do tshuva. I wish everybody a good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
Rebbe, can I ask you a question on your mashal there?
If I know.
Your mashal is the guy standing at the wedding who's shy.
Yeah.
And he brings a reason. He's feeling uncomfortable. Let's say he's suffering. He's surim. And now he brings a reason why he's shy. Right, why he's suffering, and that starts the healing process without him doing any ma'isa.
I think so. You asking me if I think that's true? I think that's true.
And that to you is a person saying vidui without saying doing tshuva.
You see that there could be a ma'isa independent of going through 10 years of therapy. I'll tell you something. Like a lot of times, a good therapist, I think, will. I took a course in therapy, because just a rabbi course in therapy. So a lot of times they tell you, like, just get the problem on the table. And then like you have a cut on your finger, you don't have to do anything necessarily to it. It's healing. But the nature of the nefesh is that if it's not out there, it's not healing. It's eating you up. So just take it out there. Here it is. Put it on the table, and a healing process will begin. However that happens, and I think that al-chet vidui is even though the Rambam says it's supposed to be the last step in Shuvah, which is preferable, but I think just putting it out there, lifnei Hashem titaru, and create a beginning of a kapara, and it's possible for me to say that it's an independent concept. Vidui.
There seems to be an inference that there's a difference between tshuva and tshuva gemura. That it's possible to do a partial tshuva.
Maybe
if you only do part of it.
These words here. You didn't see these words here, but it may be. Maybe that one helps a little bit, and the other one helps a little bit. Could be. And that's, by the way, if that's true, is it one thing or two things?
It's a higher level of one thing. If the tshuva without any maisa, it's all belev, and he didn't articulate anything, so there's no maisa there. But it could be that the amira gives you the chashivas of a maisa, and that brings it into the domain of tshuva gemura.
You know where Rabbeinu Yonah says in Shar Tshuva, if you do tshuva without vidui, you're mekayim the mitzvah v'yahavta Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha. You're mekayim avas Hashem, not necessarily mekayim tshuva. Okay, there's a lot to talk about, but I got to go. So, Yirtzeh Hashem, on Shabbos, if you can come, Shabbos afternoon, I'm sure everyone will enjoy. We'll go a deep dive into the sugi of tshuva right after mincha.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, V'rach.